Oh, I can see my freaking modem. I hate seeing my modem. Okay. We're live.
Yay!
Hi, everyone. We're back. I'm back. Mary Lou's back. And best of all, Isabella is back. We haven't seen... How long has it been, Isabella? I haven't seen you virtually in a month? More?
I have no idea. I don't even know what day of the week it is. I would say at least a month, maybe 6 weeks.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
thank
definitely
you.
was having FOMO for the last live stream.
Oh, well, this is the perfect comeback. the thot stream, the power of thought. I was very proud of that title that I came up with, by the way.
So good. Oh my gosh, it was so good.
Okay, everyone. I have been traveling all day. I just got home maybe half an hour ago. I'm exhausted, so please forgive my brain if it is a bit slower than usual, stops working, etc., etc. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe so that you don't miss future streams and to support the channel and these conversations. Women, we don't know where they are. We can't find them. So be sure, again, to like and subscribe, to share the women with the men of YouTube who think that we're standing on the sidelines and whining all the time. This, of course, is Mary Lou Singleton. I've linked to all of her socials in the show notes down below on YouTube. But I think that you should all check out her new podcast, How I Healed, which she's co-hosting with Jocelyn McDonald. And what is your regular website, Mary Lou?
My regular website is enchantedfamilymedicine.com.
Okay.
That is my business website, and you can find my herb classes. You can reach me for information on health and wellness and staying human in the digital age.
Awesome. I think that's going to be an important part of our conversation, actually, this staying human thing that everyone's trying to talk us out of doing. And Isabella Malbin is back with us again. And Isabella is an amazing person, and she hosts all sorts of classes, master classes, and workshops. And your website is
whosebodyisit.com.
Okay, and that's linked to down below also, as well as the their Twitter accounts and Instagrams and so on and so forth. I started out thinking last week about power and female power, in part because I think that what our culture at large gets wrong about power, and specifically, I think young women get this wrong because of cultural messaging, and unfortunately messaging that they receive from third wave feminism, sex positive feminism, whatever you want to call it. And certainly I think that what men misunderstand about power is that there's power in youth and beauty and sexuality. And I've found that there's this like really common narrative that I hear, particularly and like disappointingly, I would say, from the sort of like heterodox male community, because, these are the guys who I find to be questioning culture and society and politics and these kinds of things in really important ways, like, independent journalists, independent thinkers and writers, like people who are sort of like pushing back against the mainstream, maybe the accepted, the obvious narratives, but will really most often talk about older women as these like sad, lonely, desperate, pathetic people because, you know, they've lost their sex appeal and they're no longer young and beautiful, which means they have no more power. And I was like, this is the worst and stupidest and most untrue thing I've ever heard, because that I don't think that's real power. I don't think that like a 20-year-old sexy looking woman who's self-objectifying or whatever, or is like enthralled with this, what she might feel like is power that she's getting from men because they want to fuck her. I don't think that's real power. So this is sort of where all this started out for me, was thinking about like, what is there something called female power? What is that? And like, what's wrong with the narratives that we're hearing? And then of course there's all sorts of other things that we have been thinking about and talking about in the meantime, including of course Ayla's interview on trigonometry last month, which we have a lot to say about. But I want to hear from you two, and also from people who are in the live chat. Like, we want to hear from you and hear your questions. I can't keep super close track of everything that's happening in the live chat. So if you really want me to see a question, please use the super chat, but I'll try to keep an eye over there a little bit. And if you're watching on Twitter, I'm not keeping an eye on anything, so sorry. But yeah, I do want to hear from you, Mary Lou, and Isabella. This is actually a good combination because how old are you, Isabella?
I'm 32.
Oh, I always think that you're like in your 20s. I think
Thank you.
I'm like, you're so young. Yeah, well, I always think that you're wise for somebody who is so young, but you're actually very old. No, I'm joking.
I'm an old hag. Yeah, it's
and
June.
And Mary Lou is a little bit older than us. I don't know how old you are at all. You don't have to tell if you don't want to, but
I'm fine telling. I'm 53. So
you're 53.
50s
Okay,
now,
so
yeah.
I thought that I was 43, but it turns out I'm actually 44.
It's weird how that happens. Yeah.
I'm not joking. It's like,
Oh my God.
I literally, because I was like, I Googled myself today it was a long story that I'm not going to get into because it's bored. I don't go around Googling myself all the time, but I did today because I wanted to see what came up because of a podcast I was listening to, well, Blocked and Reported. And it said that I was 45, like, and this was connected to my Wikipedia page, I think. And I was like, I'm not 45. Why does the internet think I'm 45? I'm only 43. And then I was like, am I 43? And then I had to Google how old. I have like math dyslexia. I was like, how old are you if you were born in October 1979? And it said 44. And I was like, oh, fuck. I mean, it's only been like a little over a month that I've been 44, and I've been telling everybody that I'm 43 and thinking that I'm 43. So it's not that bad. But still, I was like, oh man, I was sure that I was 43 years old. And I assume this kind of thing only gets worse. But anyway, we have a good age difference between us, I think, to talk about this female power.
And I identify as 23, so
I feel like I'm going to be 35 forever. So yeah. Okay. I don't know who wants to go first here.
I'm interested in hearing what Isabella thinks as just as someone closer to that age where men seem to think women reach their power peak, in sexuality. And also because I really appreciate your incisiveness on all of these social topics.
Oof. Well, I definitely like emerged and have been immersed in like dating scenes that are exclusively made up of men who believe that sex work is work, and some of whom offered to pay me for sex at times, like would you, but like, would you, like that kind of, just waiting for the invitation, right? To be paid and exploited for my biological function.
Did you feel powerful? Did that make you feel
powerful? I did not feel powerful. I'm like, wouldn't that be shitty for you to like for us both to acknowledge that, like, I didn't want to have sex with you, because in what other conditions would I accept payment other than to replace the desire that is not there? Right? It's like, it's yeah, it never surprises me how many men, like, at least in like my age, I would say like into their maybe even up to like 40, who have really bought into the idea of like the entrepreneurial, like OnlyFans girl, because they know one woman or have dated one woman who had a positive experience. And positive meaning that, she was exclusively behind a screen, never actually having to interact with the man paying her for showing her naked body. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I think men are not willing to let go of. And I feel like I surround myself with like very smart men, and this continues to be an issue that I've come up against. But I would say that there is a deficiency. There is a lack of education around like women being empowered to speak articulately about these issues, especially in like interpersonal situations. Like, and that's why I started my platform, and why, the three of us are here today, is to like give language to the insanity, to give language so that women have words to be able to communicate in intimate settings where they are being challenged. But what is the problem? But why is this bad? Because I have been able to help men like cross over to the other side, to be like, oh wow, this is absolutely not a form of labor, and I have my kind of arsenal of examples. But yeah, it's been disheartening to like find men who get the trans stuff. They even get surrogacy. They get the vaccine stuff. But when it comes to something like porn and prostitution, there's still that like, they're not ready to like let go of that fantasy of the happy hooker.
I mean, it's interesting because when I was younger, when I was sort of like 17 to like my mid 20s, I guess, I think that was sort of like the peak time where I believed that I could be empowered through sex. Like, I did grow up during the third wave, and as much as I have been, very critical of the third wave for a very, very long time, I think that I did buy into, when I was young, that idea that like you can have sex like a man, and the best way to, have power as a woman is to avoid getting attached. And that, like, I think I did feel really powerful because I felt like, oh, I can get whoever I want. Like, all these men want to have sex with me. And it was almost like a game. But then, of course, you wake up the next day and you feel like shit. Like, you don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel like you have power. They have the power all of a sudden, mysteriously. And, I also, on some level, I don't know why, like on some level, I knew at least that wouldn't last. Like, I knew it wasn't permanent power. I knew that it was like temporary power. Now I don't see it really as power at all. But so I knew that I had to like cultivate other aspects of myself, because I was like, well, I'm not going to feel like this forever. So I do have to make sure that like I have a good personality, and like I'm intelligent, and I have other skills and interests, and like my own kind of life. And so, which is all part of why I think now, as a 44-year-old, I do feel powerful, despite the fact that some men on the internet might think that like I'm like old and washed up now, whereas I feel like great about myself. But like that's the big lie that third wave women the younger women who grew up in that era, and certainly young women now, women who are growing up now, are told is that they can and should have sex like men, and that sexuality is power, but also that sexuality doesn't really have anything to do, like, it wasn't like I was having orgasms. That wasn't good sex. I was bored out of my fucking mind. Like, the amount of times, like, I can remember sleeping with men and just like stopping partway through and leaving because I was so bored. Like, it would be like I would want to, and then it would just be so unsatisfying for me. But you don't know what's missing then, because you haven't gotten to the point where you really understand your sexuality. So at this time when women are being told that they're so sexual and they're so sexually attractive, and that they're, of course, this is all about like objectification and the male gaze and whatnot. It's actually, I think, when women are really the least sexually powerful, because they have no idea what's going on, and it's all about men wanting them, not about what they're wanting or about really any real confidence. Blah, 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 blah. I've gone on for a long time. What do you think, Mary Lou?
Well, I think, it's all really complicated stuff. And when I was listening to that really frustrating Ayla interview, I kept trying to think, kept trying to remember back that I got hoodwinked in my past into thinking sex work was work. I was actually pro feminist porn. And I thought that the main problem with prostitution and porn was that women weren't in charge of it, that that they were being pimped by men, that it was focused on male sexuality. And I sat with that. Well, how did that happen? How did I get hoodwinked like that? And it came from, like Ayla's background. I was raised in a very conservative right-wing home, and the sex education I got as a child was don't do it or you go to hell, and don't think about doing it or you go to hell. Like, that was sex ed. And then when you get married, you can start having sex, but you can't think about it until then. So obviously, like, reviewed that. I rebelled against that. Then I went to college. I started college in 1988. So I was born in like almost 1970, a couple of days before 1970 started. And I think I was born into that Generation X sweet spot where post-sexual revolution, pre-internet porn, pre-internet in general. And my generation got to have a lot of really fun exploratory sex because we all were kind of freed of this stigma around promiscuity, especially once we got away from our pre-sexual revolution parents. And where I went to college, like, no, women didn't wear makeup, nobody carried a purse, no one shaved, and men were attracted to women's like hippie bodies. Like, we were just having fun. But even in that context, I experienced what you did, Megan, that if I had one night stands, I felt really dissatisfied and yucky, and I experienced a loss of self-worth every time I would get attached, even though I wasn't intending to get attached. I'd feel really hung up on these guys and then feel gross about that. And at the same time, because I was at this liberal arts school in the late 80s, early 90s, all this Pomo stuff was coming in. We had like Annie Sprinkle coming to talk, and Susie Bright coming to do a fisting workshop, and the owner of Good Vibrations coming to tell us all about feminist porn. And I wanted to piss my parents off. And I got into this big, like, oh yeah, that's empowering. So I try to have compassion for people who are still in that phase of development. Fast forward a little bit, I was a single mom on welfare in my early 20s, and I lived in this housing complex, and almost all the women who lived around me, all the other mothers, worked at massage parlors or strip clubs. And it was horrible for them. Like, they all had addictions. They had to get really wasted to deal with going to work. They all were experiencing all this trauma of like unwanted touching, being digitally raped at the strip clubs, having guys follow them home. One of my neighbors who I was friends with came home just so messed up one day because a guy had come to the massage parlor and raped them all with a gun, like put a gun in their vaginas. And it's like, I'm like, oh my God, this is a really fucked up industry. And then one of the women was found murdered, probably by a John. And just seeing that side of it. This was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This was in the United States. And I still had this idea that, well, it's because it's not feminist sex work. It's not feminist porn. It wasn't really until, I had my children and I just started looking at the world differently and just realized, like, I don't want my kids to be involved in any kind of porn, feminist or not. And I don't want to live in a world where women are for sale. And I certainly don't want my son to grow up to be a John or a porn consumer. That really started changing my mind. And then I started looking back at the earlier second wave analysis of porn, Andrea Dworkin, Catherine McKinnon, looking at some of the contemporary work on it, and came out of that brainwashing. But it's so easy when we're reacting to right-wing repressive sexual norms in that form of oppressing women to fall for this liberal patriarchal crap, right?
It's interesting because when I tried to get on board with pornography, and I did projects in college and university about feminist pornography. And I tried to, because this is sort of what we were pushed to do. It's even worse now. But when I was first starting taking women's studies classes, which of course are now gender studies classes in college and university, there was at least sort of two sides to it. But you, of course, knew that the POMO, the postmodern third wave, pro-sex, I hate that term because I don't think that it is pro-sex or sex positive, I'm sorry, mm-hmm. that, you were supposed to, it was at the point where you were learning in women's studies that women weren't victims. So you weren't supposed to talk about any woman as a victim. Every woman was empowered. And this is when we started to, we weren't allowed to criticize things that were happening to women in third world countries because, we had to see these women as women with agency. And so the same perspective was applied to women in prostitution. So I think early on I was thinking, like, in my university career, I wanted to go and find these empowered prostitutes out on the downtown east side. And it didn't stick and it never felt comfortable. And the porn stuff in particular just made me sick. I remember specifically in college, so this would have been in maybe 1999 or 2000 or something around there. I was taking night classes at college and we were doing a project that was supposed to be looking, you could take one side. You could take the sex positive, feminist pornography side, or you could take the second wave radical feminist Andrea Dworkin anti-pornography side. And so we were doing this project, and so we rented, this was pre-internet essentially, we went to the porn store and we rented porn videos, all of which would be considered very vanilla, basic, nothing hardcore or what would be labeled as violent pornography. And I was just totally traumatized by all of them. I was completely disgusted. I didn't want to have sex with my boyfriend ever again. I, had discovered that he was using pornography and just had a meltdown over it. And he would say he'd stop, and then I would find it on the computer, and it was just this constant screaming match. And of course we broke up, not just because of that, but I couldn't, I didn't want to have sex just after seeing these videos and these images, and then knowing that, this is what he was watching. And that was just nothing. It's so much worse now. There was so much worse stuff out there that we could have watched. And at that point I was just it was almost is there something wrong with me? Why do other women think this is sexy? Why is my friend having her birthday party at a strip club and I have to leave after 20 minutes because I feel so depressed and sad and repulsed by the whole thing? It was this is so depressing. These women look so unhappy and depressed and checked out. and not sexy at all. And why are all my friends having fun? Like, what is missing here? And I think at that point, that's when I sort of started exploring, second wave texts and second wave feminism and radical feminism more, and just reading like Ariel Levy's book, which was Female Chauvinist Pigs. And I was like, oh, okay. It's, first of all, it's fine that I don't like pornography, and there's reasons why I don't like pornography. But now I feel like young women just don't have access to any of those critiques at all. Like, I was lucky that I sort of came across this stuff almost.
Right. And it's so different than it was pre-internet, where it was gross enough to like find a stack of Playboys at like your uncle's house or something like that. Like, like girls would like find Playboys in their dad's and brothers' stuff. And it always made us feel gross and yucky, but that was so tame compared to what is available on the phone 24/7, violent pornography, really intense pornography. And it absolutely has shaped culture. And I know that as a women's health provider, having watched it happen. And I think the place where it's incontrovertible that porn has shaped culture is pubic hair shaving. Like that is just the norm now. And that comes from pornography. It's not coming from PG-13 movies. It's not coming from regular media. That's coming from everybody being exposed to porn as what the normal body is supposed to look like. A friend of mine who was out of midwifery for over 10 years came back a few, 5 or 6 years ago, and called me like early in the morning. She'd been at a birth all night. And she's like, does everybody shave now? Like, what the hell is going on? Like, she'd never seen pubic hair shaving, like even 15 years ago. And now I'm almost shocked when I see a woman who hasn't deforested herself. Like that's not the norm anymore. That's porn culture. That's just one tiny example. And that is so, as much as I don't like that for so many reasons, microbiome being one of them, it's so much more innocuous than normalizing choking, normalizing really violent acts, normalization of women being expected to just have anal sex with men that they're not enjoying, really violent, horrible, degrading things that we've normalized from this industry.
Sorry, I'm gonna let you say something, Isabel, but I did want to quickly interject just because I just watched, I think it was called A House of Kardashian. It was like a short mini series on the Kardashians' rise to fame, essentially, and they're very close friends. That whole family has been really close friends for a very long time with Joe Francis, I think is his name, the guy who started Girls Gone Wild. And he was the one actually that leaked Kim and Ray J's sex tape that made her famous, that her mother arranged for her. But he brags in this documentary that they refuse to participate in because it doesn't make them look very good, that he was responsible for that trend of women shaving their vaginas. He's like, yeah, that all came from Girls Gone Wild, and now everybody does it, and now no women have. Isn't that great? Like, he was so proud of himself that he normalized that across the West, where women shave off all their pubic hair.
It's so messed up.
Yeah.
I mean,
and women totally just think it's normal. Like, nobody even questions it, right? Like, if you talk to like women my age or younger, and they're like, oh, you don't do it. I don't want to get too descriptive here, but like, it's all just a normal part of their life and lifestyle is going and getting everything waxed off all the time. It's like, why?
It's disgusting.
Oh, I just like the feel of it. Like, no, you don't. Shut up.
Well, a physician, a younger male physician, tell me it's because women expect oral sex now, and that they need to shave in order for men to have oral sex. And it's like, dude, like, okay, like, plenty of hairy hippie women in the 60s on were getting lots of cunnilingus from their boyfriends, and it was working just fine. And B, if your girlfriend has hair coming out of her clitoris, she has an endocrine problem that needs to be addressed. Like, there's no hair there. Like, it's
oh my gosh,
it's not normal. And that's coming from a male physician. Like, it's so normalized as this is necessary for healthy sex lives. Any
normal heterosexual man will, likes women's bodies.
Yes.
I've been talking with my older women friends, and we all know it's like any normal heterosexual man who isn't like a full porn addict who is attracted to women and women's bodies likes women's bodies. I've never in my life had a man say, anything about I don't, like any part of, men like to have sex and men like women's bodies and they don't think that's gross. And I really wish that women knew that. But of course, how would they know? Because they're all shaved. So they never would have any idea that a man actually is completely fine with you having hair on your body. Like a normal adult woman.
I mean, in my experience, because of how these men have been raised on porn, I think there is something to be said about like the anchored, like their orgasm is anchored over and over and over to a certain kind of image of a woman, which, as we know, is like hairless, like mostly in pornography, like hairless, completely lasered. And so I have encountered men who are like glitching, like neurologically, they're like, I want to have sex with you. I didn't know this is what I was getting into. I like you, but I'm like glitching. Like they're glitching, like because the programming is so strong. Like and just like the anchoring of the certain image to the orgasm is a very powerful connection that's made. So I have spoke to many men and encountered in my intimate life like hesitation and discomfort and confusion. Like, and it's so sad, like that this is true. And then like I didn't really have like, so maybe because of where I grew up in New York City, almost exclusively amongst liberals, like except for my mother, who I was like mortified that she was like from Texas and a registered Republican. Like aside from her, like no one in my sphere ever had like a talk with me about like why pornography would be harmful or bad. Like not even my mother. I mean, I think like moralistically, she like I knew where she stood, but it was never like really spoken about. And in my early 20s, I had two very good friends who were the most sexually out there, like going to sex parties and triads, polyamorous, who were getting raped. Like they were getting raped. And so that was my like itch, like the confirmation that I needed to be like, oh, this is like a dangerous path. Like this hypersexuality, exposing yourself to many partners at a time. As a woman, like this is the result. So, but I didn't want to think that that was true. Like I was really wanting to be proved wrong. Like I was really wanting to believe that my mom was like regressive and sex negative and prudish, and that surely, my friends were going to go out there in the wild and like show me that like this was safe and good. And, the narrative around hypersexuality and just, like pornography and is like, you have some inner like prudishness or some inner phobia, that needs to be like unleashed, like your sexuality needs to be unleashed. And while that might be true, it's like where you're being invited to go is like very dangerous. Someone in the chat asked about Kiminami, if we're familiar with Kiminami, and I am familiar with Kiminami. And I don't think she fits this to a T, but like some of the stuff that she promotes, like BDSM, like in some of her courses, it's like maybe in a very, very particular circumstance where you are like vetted, like you vetted your partner for 10 years and have like a strong sexual relationship and you want to like get tied up. Like, do I think that's like the end of the world? Like, no, but like there's a very, very specific container that, something that has such a high risk, like I would ever encourage a woman to like dabble in. And just like we hear with like the inner transphobia or like your racist baby, it's like I definitely was programmed to believe that like there was something in me that was like prudish or sex negative that just needed to be like let out. And so that resulted in like many one night stands, which is like we talked about earlier. It's like in my, like, I reduced it as like, okay, I wanted intimacy and I was trading that for sex. And I think women do this all the time. Like, they actually think that if they have sex with a man, that intimacy is just going to magically blossom, which is like the opposite, right? Of what happens. It's like that gross feeling, the shame, the guilt, the disappointment. And I was totally an Erica Lust like dabbler too. And I went to lectures of her, and then I couldn't, there was just that thing in me that was like, my friends who got raped are like obsessed with you. Like, there's something not lining up here.
I mean, the unfortunate thing is that women, especially young women, are not offered any means of power or of understanding how their bodies work and why their bodies work in this way and why we might feel bad after having a one night stand and why we feel maybe powerful for a moment when we have that, so-called sexual power, when a man wants us and it feels like he'll do anything to have us, and then it disappears the next day. And why we can't have sex like men, why we catch feelings and why it's so hard to avoid catching feelings, and why, for example, because I went through this phase, I think I went in and out of this phase for a really long time of thinking that maybe I should be open to polyamory, but it never felt okay or natural for me, because I would always get into a relationship with a man and it would be monogamous. And first of all, I wasn't interested in having a relationship with more than one person. That just sounded really stressful and complicated. But I would never feel comfortable with him sleeping with somebody else. He would never feel comfortable with me sleeping with somebody else. And then when I was, out of that relationship again, I'd be like, oh, monogamy is so impractical and I should stop being so jealous and controlling and I need to let go. And yeah, luckily I never literally did actually try it, because I'm sure it would have been horrible. But it's so weird that all of this messaging that young women are getting is so completely opposed to, and I don't want to make sweeping generalizations about all women, but we're wired to get attached. Of course we're wired to get attached. You have sex with a man, you have sex with a man, you get pregnant, you need the man to stay around to help you take care of the baby. So you're supposed to bond with him, and sex is part of that bonding, and that oxytocin that goes to your brain, the bonding chemical or the love chemical or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's all there for a reason. There's like a reason that you get emotionally attached and that you want this man to stick around when you have sex with him. And women are taught to reject that, and that if they reject that, they'll be powerful like men, and it's just not how things work.
No, and it's also not powerful for any woman to live in a culture where women are for sale. And that's kind of the basic line, right? And there's that second wave line of no woman is free when other women are for sale.
So, yeah. Okay. So before we get into this interview, for those who are watching, Ayala is, I think she's 33 or 34. And I think she's probably like the most famous OnlyFans chick, because she's just made so much money. She's been very, very successful on OnlyFans, but she's also managed to break through out of the sort of porn, out of just the like spokesperson for empowered sex workers category into this like intellectual heterodox sphere. So, she was interviewed by Lex Friedman, who was totally like googly-eyed over her. And, I think Eric Weinstein interviewed her. And of course, Benjamin Boyce has had her on. And, men always offer her to me as a means to challenge my anti-porn and anti prostitution positions, and they're like, oh, but you should really talk to Ayala. You would learn a lot from her. And I was like, I bet I wouldn't.
Right.
And I did really look into it, and we had like a little debate thing on Benjamin Boyce's channel, and I've read her blog and I've watched some of her other interviews, and I was like, all that I've learned is that this person is totally fucked up and she's selling people a lie, and I'm sure that young women are falling for it, and for whatever reason all these men are falling for it too, and I'm just totally disappointed and kind of appalled by all of them. But so she was recently on Trigonometry. I think it was October 29 is when the podcast came out, and I just listened to it recently. I avoided listening to it for a really long time because I thought it would make me really mad. And it did make me mad. I don't think it made me as angry as I thought it would. But I for those who are interested, I shared the link in the chat. I can't remember if I put it in the show notes down below, but I'll try to. But essentially, not only is she playing the role of the empowered sex worker, she loves prostitution. She loves doing pornography. It's so great. She makes $100,000 a month, but she's also like intellectualized it. And she's also a sex researcher because she collects data on her customers. She collects data on porn addicts and then applies that to, what all men like and what people like in the bedroom. It's like you're polling men who pay for sex, which I'm sorry, but men who pay for sex are going to have a fucked up view of sex and what they want and of women and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, I'm really sorry, I made Isabella and Mary Lou listen to this interview. And so I think that's what we should get into now. So what did you two think?
I mean, just like her casually mentioning that she had been like overtly raped, and that a guy tried to murder her who showed up at her house. Like, I just don't know any like other job description, like jobs where that is like part of the rigmarole. So that just seems like the most obvious red flag that she's full of shit in her defense of sex work is work. And it also revealed to me like how much she has had to normalize the abuse that she's like endured to be able to casually say, and also to make a distinction between like assault and all the other like paid rape scenarios that she's been in. Like, I found her to be incredibly disembodied and detached, and I didn't think her like rebuttals were strong. It was like part of what you described, Megan, because her like control group was like not a control group. I mean, it was just her customers, her rapists. She seemed to find comfort in formulas, in predictability, in systems, and the combination of that with the exploitation of her body is just like probably one of the worst combinations possible, like trying to intellectualize the system of rape that she's like calculated, which again is like for me just felt like a further denial of like, if I can list it and calculate it and inventory it and charge for it, then and be interviewed about it, certainly like I could never be out of control. I make $100,000 a month. How could anyone think I am not in control?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I have a gazillion.
I mean, that's the big lie around what these men and what everyone is supposed to be calling sex work now: prostitution, pornography, the sex industry. to normalize, legitimize, sanitize it. We're supposed to call it sex work now, which the trigonometry guys participated in. But it's that the number one response is always, well, I mean, she's getting paid. Look at how much money she's making. Isn't that great? Which is like, it's like, this is the stupidest defense for anything. Just because you make money, it's great. Getting paid doesn't make a thing ethical. Like, what a dumb, unthinking argument. Like, beyond, there's all sorts of other problems and issues with the sex trade, of course, but that the number one defense of prostitution and that, I don't want to say like defense of women who sell sex, because I think that like most women in prostitution pornography come from abuse and molestation and trauma and struggle with mental health issues and addiction and self-esteem and all this other shit, right? But like that, it's always turned around and away from the man who's watching porn and the man who's paying for sex to be like, well, maybe she just really likes sex, and I mean, she's getting paid, so like, good for her to take advantage of this wonderful opportunity where she can make so much money from these guys who are really just so stupid and naive and falling for her shtick or whatever. And like, as if getting paid negates the trauma and like erases the fact that you have to separate mind from body just to do this so-called work. Like, just having money, like, I feel empowered and I don't have any money. Ella makes 3 times more than I do a month.
and no amount of money would be able to protect her from the reality of being impregnated by a man, wanting his attention and resources and support, and then him going and impregnating his other partner. Like, I just kept thinking of that scenario. Like, she said things like, she doesn't understand why her boyfriend sleeping with other women would ever hurt her in any way. And I just thought, wow, that is like a statement of a non-mother, of a woman who's never worked with mothers, a woman who's never witnessed a mother lose time, like her child lose time because of the choices that her partner has made or ex-partner is making. Like those were the things that were coming up where I was just like, it is strange to me that she could not find a reason why her boyfriend sleeping with other women could ever hurt her. Like this, I mean, and she said many times, like she processes information differently. Well, like trauma survivors, like also process information differently. So that I feel like she kept saying that as like I'm special. Like I'm the pick me, like I'm the one that guys love to have sex with because like I can do it, but you can't, like,
and actually I love it.
Yeah.
Not just like I can cope, not just I can deal. Like, I love it. I get turned on by strange random penises. Just penises. Doesn't matter what the man is. Oh, I'm not thinking of him as attractive. It's just, I just get turned on by random dicks. I love it. I don't know. I'm just wired differently.
Right. And it's like, survivors of like violent rape also sometimes can only become lubricated and aroused by violent sexual situations. Like, it's not proof that you are somehow evolved in a way that we are not. It's
well, and the trigonometry guys, who I'm very conflicted about now, because up until this interview I had so much respect for them, and I felt like they both just acted like classic dick-driven minds while during this interview. Like they didn't actually intellectually challenge her on anything. They both just seemed like energetically they were sitting there with erections, so excited to talk to this sexy woman talking about how she likes dicks. But anyway, they alluded to what you're saying of how women can be turned on by violence because of the history of rape in our species. And they just were matter of fact about that and didn't talk about cultural change agency and is that something we want to normalize? Is that something we want to just state as a fact and move on? Like, oh yeah, some women are turned on by violent rape because they've been raped. Rather, if we're talking about, yes, some people are severe alcoholics because they were raised by alcoholics, we don't just normalize that. We try to figure out a way to break that cycle, right? If we say some people only know dysfunction, or some people don't learn to read because the people around them have never learned to read, we don't normalize that. Why were they so quick to just act like that's just a fact and that's just fine?
Yeah.
And yeah, some chick's dick being raped, and that was so distressing to me that they didn't dig a little deeper on that.
I didn't think that they were fawning all over her or that they were just sitting there with boners. I think that they did challenge her. I think that like those guys, I like both of them. I think they're smart. I've listened to other interviews where they've challenged the pro-prostitution, pro-pornography narratives. I think they were out of their depth. I think that it's, first of all, like they don't have a super combative interview style in general, but when I have heard them be sort of combative and push back, it's in areas and when they're talking about subjects they're super familiar with and have like a very confirmed, informed position on. And I think, this is sort of why it's really irritating actually that a lot of these guys are having her on their podcast to talk about what it's like to be a sex worker who really enjoys herself, because they don't really understand the issue. So the ways that they, the things that they were challenging her on were, they seemed sort of more uncomfortable than anything else and weren't really sure where to go with their questioning, less than like, oh, we're falling all over ourselves over this chick. I don't really know that they did fall for her, but the ways that they challenged her were around the danger, like, okay, well, wouldn't you say this is dangerous? And then, she says like she has been raped in prostitution and a man came to her house and tried to murder her. And then the other question around like, oh, well, maybe this isn't so good, was around reputational damage. So I think they really, I don't think they understand the porn and prostitution issue. Again, it's one of those really frustrating things because they feel like women, and I know that feminism is like, wah, 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 so boring, but it's like men really do, they've completely written off feminism, in part because there's so much fucking stupid feminism out there today, but they've written it off to the point where they've completely ignored what all these women like us, but many other women over decades have said about transgenderism and said about porn and prostitution. And then they jump in right now and they're like, oh, we should question, is pornography, is it really good for women to be in pornography and prostitution? Why are trans women in women's prisons? Like, and it's like, you've completely been fucking ignoring everything that we're saying, and you haven't paid attention to this at all. And you haven't read what women have written about this and said about this and talked about for many years, and now you don't know what the fuck you're talking to, and then you're presenting dangerous narratives. And it's not, I don't think that the interviewer is responsible for what the interviewee says. Like, I interview people all the time, and often people will think that I'm agreeing with an interviewee because I don't share my opinion or necessarily challenge them or say, well, I think this. And it's just, that's not, sometimes people say things and I don't agree with it. I don't say anything. But, one of the really dangerous things that happened in this interview was that when she was talking about, oh, I just think I process sex differently, so I'm into this and it's fine for me, and maybe I'm not normal. And they're like, no, you're definitely not normal. But yeah, maybe I think there's just some women who process sex differently, which to me ends up leaning into this, like, maybe there's a prostitute gene. Like, maybe there's some women who are wired this way and we can just put all them in the sex industry because they're fine with it and actually they really like it.
Right.
Ugh.
They really did not have the depth of understanding about the Nordic model to challenge her on her misrepresentation of that. We know that the data is absolutely solid, that the Nordic model protects women. There is fewer women who are being prostituted or murdered in the Nordic model. It's easier to exit, and women can choose to sell themselves under that. And she really misrepresented what the Nordic model is. First, she said she wants prostitution to be legal because there are times she's been raped and she can't go to the cops. She would be able to go to the cops under the Nordic model. But she described it as it would leave her unable to talk to the police and also criminalize her buyers. It was just this like wide open place for them to step in and actually repeat what they've learned from Julie Bindel, which apparently they haven't learned. They just, they really don't understand what that model of prostitution is.
Yeah. And the not taking it to scale, like not applying everything that she's saying and like taking it to scale and then applying it to like minority women, like it would have been so much more interesting if she had just been like, I'm traumatized and I have sex with a lot of people and I make a shit ton of money and I'd like to keep doing it. Like I would have been like, okay, yeah.
And if we're being honest, this is part of my con. I am getting all the heterodox men to bring me more business.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I wish they had.
And making them feel more comfortable. These guys who might think that they're like above pornography, or maybe we're engaging in critiques of pornography and we're like, oh, well, I can watch this porn because she loves it and she's really smart and she really knows what she's doing.
And I felt like they kind of also, I could see parts where they were totally fawning and uncomfortable, like to challenge her. And I feel like they were falling prey to the like believe sex workers or like believe trans women. It's like, I think there were moments where I was like, you're not saying what you're thinking. Why? You know? So I definitely felt that from them. And
yeah.
The like added layer of the like them being visibly like aroused and entertained and like entranced in a state of trance, like as she was talking, as she was demonstrating her techniques, you could see them like smiling and getting a little uncomfortable. It's like it was definitely disappointing. And I feel that it's like we could give them like 10 talking points to just totally crush the whole thing. But there doesn't seem to be like a willingness. And at the end of the interview, I was like, protecting women and girls is not at the forefront of these guys' minds. And for us, we are seeing everything through that lens. Like I'll speak for myself, it's like, does this work for women and girls, like as a sex class? And obviously it doesn't. And the example that I wish they had brought in, which, Dr. Suzanne Forbes-Vierling, armed me with, which is like, okay, if sex work is work and should be protected under law, then in women's prisons where they are expected to work, that why couldn't there be brothels and like surrogacy dormitories? Like why couldn't that then be implemented if it's work and it's protected under law and there are conditions to make it safe?
And it's a job like any other.
It's a job like any other.
Better than factory work, according to Ayala.
Oh yeah. They wouldn't have to be sewing buttons anymore. They could just be having sex with men.
I want to know what factory this was. And just as someone who grew up in an industrial town that like fell apart with the deindustrialization, like factory jobs actually are pretty good jobs usually. Like I feel like she just made up this factory thing, or she'd have more details about it.
I don't think she was there for very long. I know it's a funny story where it's like, I worked in a factory for whatever, like a few weeks, and I didn't like it. And then I was homeless. And I mean, her background is that, she came from a severely abusive household. Her dad was really abusive, and they were these super, fundamentalist Christian, I think, or something of the like. And so she was super repressed, and, she was like sleeping on somebody's couch and really had no choice, and then tried cam work and started making money. And then that's the only thing she's ever done since. And, that backstory to me, which I've heard in more than one interview, which is why I'm sort of like, is no one else hearing this? Like, this doesn't seem like that surprising or interesting. This is like a common path for women who have trauma.
Right.
Yeah. And the polyamory, I mean, I was thinking about her like experience in relationship and like her expectation of relationship. Like every time she said, I have a boyfriend who loves me, I thought, like, what does that look like for you? Like, if he has other girlfriends, like I'd like genuinely curious, like, what are your real needs in a relationship, and what are the men that you are with like providing for you? If you make $100,000 a month, they have sex with other women. Like, is it companionship? Is it a roommate? Is it sex where money isn't exchanged? Like that. I had so much curiosity about like her experience in intimate partnership, and based on what she shared, I don't know that there is much to aspire to, And I was really like judgmental and like doubtful when she said, I have a boyfriend who loves me.
She apparently has a pretty severe attachment disorder. I think that's clear, that she's traumatized or has a psychological disorder. She kept saying, I'm not a normal woman. To me, she seemed like a character straight out of Brave New World, where which is so, everyone quotes Orwell, but Brave New World is so much what we're living through, where everyone's on psych meds, all the babies are made in IVF factories and grown in artificial wombs, and everybody's on all the women are on birth control, and sex is just something you trade around, and you shouldn't get attached. If you get attached, there's something wrong with her. It's like she could have just been beamed in from that world, and I don't think that's the world we want to live in. And so much of what we supposedly are doing in what gets called the heterodox space is trying to be cultural change agents, right? To not normalize all of this dysfunction.
I mean, this has always been the failure of the left and of libertarians, right? When I started writing about this stuff publicly and doing podcasts about this stuff publicly, in kind of 2011, I guess, around then, 2010, 2011, it was the leftists and the libertarians who were after me and calling me whorephobic and telling me that I hated sex workers, or that I was moralistic, or that I was a prude and I was judgmental and I was a Christian right winger and all this stuff that was totally insane as somebody who grew up in a household that was like Marxist and feminist and like completely anti-organized religion. And to me, I just thought, if I can just explain these arguments, clearly these people don't understand. If I can just explain, then they will understand. And I just spent years and years and years like trying to show how awful and exploitative and misogynist and racist, I'll use all these words and these identities that all the leftists claim to care about a lot, about how bad it is. And these are corporations, and this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and these women are coming from poverty and have no real choice, and talking about the Nordic model. And I mean, I think it did work on some leftists, but the libertarians, again, disappointing, because there's libertarians that I have respect for, and I have libertarian viewpoints now too, I think, in some areas, who just go, well, free speech, free expression, and that's where the conversation ends. Like, it's her choice. And it's like, yeah, okay, you can say that it's her choice, but if this was just something that Ella or whoever it is was doing in her private life, okay, that's your choice. I think the men who are paying you are disgusting and unethical and bad people. I think that OnlyFans and the people who own OnlyFans and are making money off all of these women are pimps and disgusting, unethical people. But okay, you're making that choice. Like, I hope that you get out of it and you think differently. But she's promoting OnlyFans.
Mm-hmm.
And she makes money when, if she recruits a girl to OnlyFans, she gets a cut. So she's
Right.
promoting OnlyFans to, hundreds of thousands, who knows how many girls who are not going to make very much money at all. The average that women make on OnlyFans is like $70 a month. And then you've sold your soul and you've sold your body and your sexuality to a bunch of fucking creepy strangers on the internet. You've made a bunch of money for OnlyFans. She's acting as a shell for the sex industry. So it's not just her choice.
No.
When she speaks about it like that and just pretends that she's wired differently, and some women are just wired differently and it's okay for them.
She's recruiting and advertising for OnlyFans on Trigonometry, on Benjamin Boyce's podcast, on Eric Weinstein's podcast, and by doing that, those men are advertising OnlyFans now, and there was no challenging of that. I think that Constantine and Francis tried to challenge her on the aspect of, if sex work is work like any other work, and your boss asks you for a blowjob, you can't say it's sexual harassment. It's just not in your job description. But again, they haven't deepened their analysis and gotten their argumentation straight enough to have fully, like, she weaseled around it, and they didn't have the solidity of an argument to really express that, of what that does to all women if, like Ayla Hunt's, blowjobs can just be written into anybody's job description, which she thinks is fine, whether you're a barista or a doctor or anyone. So I had a real problem with that, just their lack of depth on these topics. And then there was no talking about what's happening in countries that have legalized prostitution, where I think of the mega brothels in Germany, and poor women being told you can't have access to the benefits of the welfare state because there's a job sucking dicks down the street. Like, you can go work in the brothel so that you can't get welfare because you're not taking this job that's available. The fact that men can walk into those brothels and a group of men can rent a woman for an hour and just gang rape her for an hour. And how can anyone know that's going on and be pro prostitution? It's so horrific what's happening. These are easy examples that I wish the Trigonometry guys just could have pulled out and challenged her with, but instead it's pretty clear they haven't really delved into this issue, where half of humanity is considered a commodity by the other half of humanity.
Yeah, and they totally bought into, like, her celebrity, which is the only reason why she's been asked, because she's made a lot of money and also made a name for herself as a researcher. It's like, not everyone who makes $100,000 a month and has a Substack is worthy of being interviewed and platformed. Like, it's just, it was just disappointing on all levels. Like, that she's been elevated as some kind of sex researcher is just beyond comprehension, when she does not even have a basic understanding of, like, human psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, one of the most basic arguments against prostitution is, like, why would you want to have sex with somebody who doesn't want to have sex with you?
Mm-hmm.
And if they did want to have sex with you, you wouldn't have to pay for it. Like, that's the whole point. If a woman wants to have sex with you, actually, she's going to have sex. If the two people are genuinely consenting because they're both really into each other and attracted to each other and they want to have sex, you don't need to pay for it. You pay because they don't want to have sex with you and you want them to have sex with you even though they don't want to do it. So that's what the exchange of money is about. And what kind of man wants to have sex with a woman who doesn't want to have sex with him? And, what does that tell him, and what has he told himself about what sex is and, what women are for? And I think it's weird that more people don't ask that very obvious question. And Ayla, said during that trigonometry interview, like, well, I mean, this was sort of in a different context, but I think it's relevant, which is that, women in monogamous relationships, so they're talking about it in terms of unwanted sex. Like, are you attracted to these men? Do you want to? And she's like, of course, yeah, I get like wet with random dicks. And then, but she's talking about like, but maybe it's unwanted sex, but women who are in marriages have unwanted sex all the time. Like this has been happening for all of history, that women are having sex that they don't want to have with their husbands because their husbands want sex and they don't want to do it. And I was like, I don't think you know shit about people's relationships. I'm not having sex when I don't want to have it.
Right.
I would never have sex when I don't want to have it. Maybe, I actually did try to do that when I was younger and felt like I should. And you know how that made me feel? Disgusted.
Well,
like, sure, okay, women do that. Like,
yeah,
good.
Well,
a good man will feel disgusted by it too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, does your partner feel good when you say, oh, I had sex with you and I didn't want to? No, they would feel awful and horrible, or they should.
Yeah. So in that case, she was either just like acting very well to like stay in character. Like, I think the whole interview, she was like very good about staying in character. Like, she couldn't have done that interview talking about how like she wants to crawl out of her skin when she has sex with so many, like, these are her paid subscribers, like these are her recurring clients, like of a very high, like, pay grade, you're right, that she's getting. Like, so I think she did like everything that we witnessed was a performance. Like, she's was very good about staying in character. But then I feel like what you just mentioned, Megan, was like perhaps a bit of like a slip up where she's like revealing to us perhaps like an early childhood experience of witnessing a woman who is trapped in her marriage, like if those are the extremes in her mind, like, so like there could be some, not that it applies to all women or any woman that I know personally, but that like that example was probably imprinted on her like at an early age for her to bring that up. But yeah, I just like, even like I feel like a little foolish, like I just had this like wave of foolishness like wash over me like a few minutes ago, where I'm just like, we are analyzing like a total actor, like this everything, like all the notes that I've taken are like, it was a complete like performance where she is very strategic in what she is saying and not saying, and thinking about, what is like Ben from Idaho gonna think, who pays me $25,000 a month, gonna think when he sees this, like I have to keep him in mind. It's like, yeah, I'm just.
And she is a businesswoman, and she knows these men who are interviewing her in the heterodox community have a primarily male following, right? I would imagine it's at least 75% male. This is, she's expanding her fan base, and now these guys can feel good about giving her or some other prostituted woman business, oh, chicks dig it. Yeah. And these men are giving her platform. It's like allowing a multi-level marketing shill on your podcast, right? Or allowing a con artist on your podcast. Like, come join Scientology.
I mean, they wouldn't know that. I'm sure, like I'm sure I've had people on the podcast here and there who were shilling, and after I was kind of like, that person was not being authentic. They were trying to sell their wares in a way or something like that. So I can see how somebody might fall for it thinking, oh, we can find out more about what's going on with this person or what's happening on OnlyFans. But I mean, there were, and usually are parts of her interviews that are revealing about the real circumstances of who she is and why she's in prostitution and pornography that are sad or dark. And, I think her whole backstory is like that. But I mean, she's clearly... she's so obviously detached from her body. And I think that's like, that should be the most obvious sign of trauma to people. And, you know, like when I think about like, okay, men, maybe like a lot of men, I think, don't understand what it feels like to have sex with somebody that you don't want to have sex with, or what it feels like to be sexually assaulted, you know, like, or just, yeah, like in a marriage or with your boyfriend, and to, you know, be doing something that you don't want to do, and how gross that feels. Because I don't think that very many men have that experience. But, you know, you'd think that when somebody starts talking about like, you know, I can just compartmentalize it in this way and I'm really good at doing that, this is trauma, spidey senses would go off. But at the same time, I think that's been so normalized in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to me, the fact that like the most normal way that young people think about dating is via dating apps is exactly that. You know, that it's like, you know, young women and young men alike think this is the only or the primary way to meet people is by swiping through bodies and faces with no other information, and choosing and matching and then chatting and maybe meeting up, rather than going out into the world and interacting with people and finding somebody that you have chemistry with, and sort of, you know, things happening organically. Like it's all completely detached from body and self and evolution and humanity, like who we actually are as humans and why we are the way we are as humans. But again, that's something that, you know, you'd sort of hope that the heterodox community would see through. But, you know, I guess there's lots of these heterodox people who are sort of pro technology and pro, you know, like AI and pro transhumanism in some ways. Lex Friedman, of course, is a good example of that. He's selling all that stuff, right? So I don't know. Again, like if people are watching and you're in the live chat and you have questions you want to ask or comments that you want us to see, please use the super chat or ask a question, and I'll try to keep my eye on things over there. I feel like there was other things that I had to say about this interview. But I think, sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, I just remembered the way it, like one of the last points she made in her like revealing of her finds as a researcher was that ultimately women just want to be choked more. That choking was a secret desire. That
one of the things that she found in her research is actually women like violent porn more than men do.
Right. Right.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Like, was it I just could not believe that. Like honestly, even if that were true in her preliminary findings, how fucking reckless to say that. Like, just not even considering like the consequences of what vulnerable women like just oh my gosh, maybe like that's the answer to like the dysfunction in my marriage. Like I just need to be more open to violence in the bedroom. Like that must be it. Like even like the just the just like the imprinting, like that could possibly be true, like from a sex reacher is just like, I mean, yeah, just again, like I felt like the interviewers and she just like the last thing they were thinking about was like, how will this impact women and girls on a global scale?
Mm-hmm.
Like that could like the farthest thing from their minds.
Well, and I mean, the violent porn thing, it's like, how could that possibly be true? Like, you'd have to be stupid to believe that, because like what, 90, you know, like 90% of porn consumers at least are men.
Right.
So to say, just on its face, to say women enjoy violent porn more than men do is bullshit. Because why would there be so the reason that there's this much violent porn out there, like beyond our wildest imagination, the amount of violent porn that's out there, is because men are consuming it.
Right.
Because men are watching it, not because like millions and millions and billions of women are watching it. That doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand why these men are continuing to feed this delusion that she's a researcher. Like this, especially someone like Eric Weinstein. Like these men would call out a man who's calling himself a researcher when he's just like polling his friends and customers. Like this is
on TikTok.
It's not on TikTok, right? The women who answer her surveys are women who are not repulsed by her. They are women who
right.
who support this really misogynist industry. They're not normal women with normal desires and normal sex lives. And then the men are all porn addicts and porn consumers and Johns. And I don't understand how the men in the heterodox sphere are not challenging that piece of it. You're not a researcher. If I showed up and said, I did some research of all the people I know, and it turns out that 90+% of people are actually very opposed to mandatory vaccination. Like that's not research.
Right.
That's pulling my bubble.
Everyone I knew ran away from Canada and America to Mexico because they didn't want to get the jab.
Yeah, it turns out
90% of people.
All 10 out of 10 of my friends all think I'm awesome.
Totally. This is not research. And have we heard any of these men who are fawning over her challenge her on, like, you really shouldn't call yourself a researcher. You're doing surveys of Johns and porn addicts and traumatized women who like to be choked and women who are
You're asking porn users who already watch porn what they're watching. Like that's not representative of women or of men.
No. And they could have said, Louise Perry's line of, if a man can maintain an erection while beating or strangling a woman, women need to stay away from him. Like he's not a good man as a sex partner, certainly, but even to, don't be around him. That's a sadist. But I was just so disappointed that these men who have interviewed so many brilliant women on these topics haven't been paying attention.
Have they? Has Lex Friedman ever interviewed a woman about this topic?
No, I was meaning Constantine and Francis, who I really like, and now I'm really struggling with some feelings.
I still really like them. I think that they just were out of their depth.
We can't all be Libras.
Sorry to be such a ball palmer.
Such a Libra ball palmer who can
maybe they'll redeem themselves somehow.
Maybe they'll watch our live stream.
I mean, I was going to say one of the things that I was going to say before, and I blanked with my airplane brain, is that I actually liked, because I think maybe this part bothered you guys, but I would like to hear from you. I liked the part where she talked to them about how she seduces a man, because I thought it was so revealing and so insulting to men. She talks about, like, here's what I do to seduce a man. I lower my voice. I start speaking slower. I don't use big words, because men, like, they don't want to, obviously, they want their prostitute to seem accessible and not hard to get. They don't want to seem challenged. And, of course, a man who's paying for sex wants not a real woman with real thoughts and feelings, who has anything negative or critical to say, who isn't challenging in any way, who is just there playing this role of kind of like a really sexy doll who just adores you and is up for anything, like not a real person. Like this is what, feminists have been saying forever. Like a man who's paying for sex doesn't want a human being. He doesn't want a full person. He wants a body. He wants a woman who's playing a role. And the fact that men are falling for this, and that these men who are considered to be intellectual and, heterodox and so on and so forth would be falling for it, is just so embarrassing and insulting to those men. But it's also a huge insult to the men who are paying for Ayala's pornography and paying her for sex. But maybe she doesn't realize that, or maybe people, that's what I heard. I was like, that's great. I'm really glad that you spelled that out.
Yeah, I just thought the messaging, again, was just so dangerous to women and girls, which is like, when you are as accessible as possible, you make lots of money and get lots of attention. Like, this is a trick. Like, this is how you can manipulate. You are as accessible as possible. And I remember, like, I'm just like recovering a memory from middle school where I could not understand why the not prettiest girl in the school would get the most attention from men. Like, it didn't compute for me, like, from the other boys. I would thought, like, wait, there's like, everyone has agreed upon that there's like the prettiest girl in school, but like, why doesn't she get the most attention from the boys? Right. And it's like, I mean, I guess to like pull from her theory, it's like the woman, the girl who got the most attention had the fewest boundaries and was the most accessible.
And sort of played a role, you know, and that's, I think, like, that was the beginning, that experience that you're describing. I had those experiences also, and I think that was like the beginning of me feeling like I didn't fit in with femininity, or not the beginning, because when I was a kid, I was always like a tomboy. But I think when I was like in high school and I was a teenager, and I was like, why can't I be like that? Like, why can't I play that role of that girl? And all these men are just falling over themselves all over her because she knew how to play this role of what a man wanted, which wasn't her true, authentic, real self. And I just could never do it. And I just felt like, oh, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I like a loser and I'm not attractive to men? And I did, you know, get older, and then I was attractive to men, and, you know, but like, I didn't get it either. And I didn't even really entirely understand what she was doing, but I just wasn't able to play that role. And it made me feel like there was something wrong with me, I think, as a young woman, or there's something wrong with like my femininity or something like that.
Yeah. And those girls, like in middle school and in high school, like, the result of that accessibility was short-term sexual experiences with men who discarded them. Like, that was the result, that like, of the accessibility. Like, it didn't grant her any real power or status, other than like me being kind of dumbfounded and curious as to why this was happening, you know, like,
yeah.
So it's a lie. It's a total lie. So yeah, just her. Yeah. So again, like her messaging, just that to get what you want, to get attention, to get money, you have to be as accessible as possible, is just so. I mean, like, aren't we trying to teach girls like discernment and boundaries? It's like everything she shared was like the antithesis of that, I felt, throughout the whole interview. I'm like, what part of this would you deliver to a 12-year-old girl? Hopefully none of it.
I mean, I think that she sort of tries to frame it as like, I'm just weird, and it's okay for girls to be weird, and some girls, you know, like, you know, I just am okay with, and I'm interested in polyamory, and again, like, I'm interested in having sex with strangers, and I'm not into monogamy, and this is just, I don't know why I am this way. And so she wouldn't think of it, and she describes herself as like autistic, which may very well be true. She does seem like she's kind of autistic, but I think, I mean, she obviously doesn't think of it as harmful. I think she thinks of it, or at least frames it as, you know, just be open-minded to diversity. Like, there's different kinds of women. Not all women are like this. And maybe I'm weird, but there's other like weird women too. And men just love that. They love the idea that there's just some women who are just really okay with polyamory. They're really okay with them sleeping with women outside of the relationship. There's some women who just really enjoy casual sex, so they don't have to feel bad about, you know, I've had a one night stand and I'm not going to contact her again or treat her with respect or kindness. I don't have to see her again. And of course, now it's totally okay and acceptable for me to use pornography and pay for sex. This justifies all of those mantras and those narratives that they've been trying to force on us for the past 20 odd years around sex work is work, and this is totally harmless.
Yeah. And if she was just like in a small clan and didn't have access to the internet, like, the repercussions of her behavior and choices would be far less concerning. But she is a very, you know, I mean, I think she does have power. Like, she is influencing, I think, in a really negative way. Like, this talk was called, like, what is female power? And I feel like she does have power, and she's making decisions that are really bad for women and girls.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that's a good thing to talk about before we wrap up, which is what is female power. I mean, I think because we in general live in this super youth-centric culture where we treat young people with a lot more respect than they deserve. As though like youth activists, like, listen to the children. It's like, don't listen to the children. Why would you ever listen to the children? Since when have we decided we should be listening to the children on like political matters or policy? Like, no, this is totally stupid. Like, don't any of you remember being like 15 or 16 years old and thinking that you knew everything and that you were very intelligent and you most certainly should be making decisions about policy and politics, and look back and be like, oh, I didn't know anything at all. And of course, nobody should have listened to me. So there's that. But it's also, the fact that people can't imagine that women have any power beyond the power to get a man to want to fuck her is shocking to me. Like, and because it's just not true. And I think any woman who is like a full adult and older who does feel empowered would know better. And then, but I feel like we're not really hearing from those women. And it's maybe it shouldn't be strange to me that so many men do assume that once you get past, 30 or 40 or whatever age they've decided you become washed up, that you just become totally sad and lonely and depressed because men aren't chasing after you, which is just not true. I mean, I meet men constantly. It's so silly. Like, I don't really think about it that much in those terms. Like, I don't care if somebody is looking at me walking down the street or not. I don't think of myself in that way. But like, that we think that we're competing with 20-year-olds or 17-year-olds, that we think of all women as competition because we're always in competition for the attention of some dude who likes looking at boobs. Like, and the fact that, yeah, it's not real power. Like, it's totally temporary. It's totally superficial. It gives you nothing to be able to attract a man one time. So what does female power look like?
What does female power look like? I'm as I'm like coming into different phase of life, sort of as a baby crone, I'm thinking of like female power to me right now looks like the archetype of the Baba Yaga, like living alone in the woods and like the scary house up on chicken feet and flying around in a mortar and pestle. And she's got all this very important information that other people need just to know how to live. But she might kill you if you come and ask her questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not the only image of it, but that's one I'm really into right now. Of like, yeah, sovereign and don't fuck with her.
When I think trusting of herself, I feel like I'm coming into my crone years early. And I listened to Women Who Run with the Wolves recently, and I highly recommend everyone do that if they haven't, especially listening to it, because she reads it and it's nice to hear her voice reading it. I think it's probably different than reading it on a page, but but I think that like learning, I wish that we didn't unlearn this and then have to relearn it, but trusting your gut and trusting your instincts and trusting yourself and not letting anybody fuck with that and make you feel crazy or doubting that you know what you're doing and you know who to trust and who not to trust, and you don't care if you hurt the feelings of a person, man or a woman, who's toxic, or you set boundaries with them or whatever, and you continue on your path despite attempts from every which way to divert you or to make you feel bad or insecure about where you're going and what you're doing and where you're heading and about your happiness. You know, when people try to tell me that actually it's just like I cope. Like I am really going to turn around and feel sad that I didn't get married and have kids, and I'm going to be depressed and alone. And I'm like, you guys have been telling me this for many years and it's not happened. And I still do. And, you know, I totally acknowledge that most women are going to want to have kids and should really think very seriously about having kids in their fertile years, but it's just never been what I wanted. And I don't want it now. And I'm happy and I do like my life and I don't feel lonely in the least, or like there's something missing. But you know, people trying to convince you that what you feel and what you know and what you want is wrong, and you know, try to force you to sort of question yourself in that way. And yeah, and sort of just, and not really caring, like, I don't know whether you're attracting the male gaze or not, and not really caring what irrelevant people think about you or whether they like you or not. Like, I feel like that's powerful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Well, I've been thinking about it in terms of like feeling like gaining trust from people and then using that trust to influence. Like, that to me is power. Like the fact that women messaged me and all of us asking for our opinions and takes on things, like that feels like a position of power. Like that women are looking to certain women to, because they trust us, to share our thoughts on various issues. Like, that is like not a power, to be taken lightly. Like a position of influence to me feels powerful. Like I feel powerful when I am in a position of influence, and I don't take it lightly, even in a small group. If someone's coming to me for a class, like that feels like, if there is trust there, then that is power, right? And that could be weaponized, like join my MLM,
Subscribe to my OnlyFans.
Yeah, subscribe to my OnlyFans, like use my daily. It's on sale. And then on a personal level, I feel like harnessing personal responsibility and choices to, get the desired outcome I want in my like romantic life feels like a source of power. And not that like I distinct from needing to feel desired by many men, and wanting the male gaze, but finding a path to secure the right man to build a family with, and to secure resources with, and to secure like to orient attention. Like that feels powerful and important. Like, yeah, I mean, I just keep coming back to her like saying that she like the Ayala wanting children and having all these partners, and I'm just like, how powerful are you going to feel when your intimate partner is impregnating multiple women simultaneously? Like, that is going to be a position of feeling powerless, no matter how much money you have. Like, for me, it's like like the power in the relationship and relationship to men will be, solidifying like safety and security, like emotionally, sexually, financial. So that's my personal idea of power, female power.
I didn't hear her say she wanted to get pregnant or
She said she wanted to have
She wanted
kids.
kids. She said she wanted
but she didn't say she wanted to get pregnant. I just was
Oh, right. No, she actually
like,
likes surrogacy. I've heard her
Yeah.
say, because she's said,
a
oh,
great
kids are
point.
lovely. I do want to have kids. But then I have heard her in other places say, like, she doesn't want to actually get pregnant and give birth to her own kids. She likes the idea of having a surrogate.
That's what I heard the undertone of, like just being a midwife and having talked to a lot of women who want a baby. I didn't hear her have, like, it doesn't sound like she's someone who has baby fever, who wants to reproduce with the power of her own body, which segues to me to another part of female power that is very important to me, which is sovereignty over our bodies and understanding how our bodies work, and not turning our power over to authorities to be able to have control over our fertility and to trust ourselves to reproduce. So I think that there's so much power in a woman who understands her own reproductive capacity and is in charge of her own fertility and trusts herself, if she does want to have children, to be able to do that well and not assume it's going to be this pathological medical situation requiring authority figures. And then that comes into the fact that it's powerful that women create humanity, that it is our power, that we do. Every human on the earth was created by a woman, and that's powerful, and that we need to step into claiming that. And then I do believe that when it comes to raising children, the woman is the energetic center of the home, and there's a power in that, and that there is a power in raising new people, and passing on wisdom and modeling sovereignty to our male and female children is powerful. And I also think it's powerful to say you don't want children. That's great to not have that pressure. Thank God we live in a time where we've been freed. If anything, it's almost the opposite. We live in a very anti-natalist time right now, sort of an anti-fertility cult. But I guess I would prefer that to women being forced to give birth to children. No, but listening to your inner knowing of whether or not you even want to be a mother.
Yeah, I think understanding your body and your fertility is incredibly powerful for women. And again, unfortunately, that's something that we're taught. We're taught not to trust our bodies. We're not taught anything about our bodies. In fact, we're taught that we can't understand and have control of our own bodies. So we need to go on the pill, for example. But yeah. I think, do we have anything else to say before we sign off? I linked to the trigonometry interview with Ayala in the show notes below for those who are asking. And of course, Mary Lou is at, on Twitter at ML_Singleton. Her website is enchantedfamilymedicine.com. Her new podcast with Jocelyn McDonald is howihhealed.substack.com. Isabella is at whosebodyisit.com and on Twitter at whosebodyisit. But yeah, I don't know. I really want to shake people out of this notion and this assumption that the only power that women have and can have is as these like young women that men are superficially sexually attracted to. And I mean, it's so stupid to me that people think that, like, a woman gets divorced in her 40s or her 50s or even her 60s and like that's it for her, because it's just not. Like, women and men, all sorts of people date throughout their entire lives and find new love and continue having sex. Like, do you think that ugly people are not having sex and hooking up? Do you think that old people are not finding love and having sex? Like, this is just like, if you step out into the world, you'll see that that's clearly not true. And again, I mean, what's the worth in having the power to get random men to gaze at you when they have sex with you and you don't enjoy yourself because you don't know how to have an orgasm and you don't know anything about your body and you're trying so hard to perform whatever porn fantasies for him that you think that you're supposed to like, but you don't, and you're thinking about what your body looks like. I mean, that has nothing to do with sexuality or empowerment.
And it doesn't age well. I mean, it really does. It does fit into that, what Gail Dine says about this messaging that you're either fuckable or you're invisible. And that's not powerful at all. Everybody's going to age out of that so-called power, right? Unless you die young, which is not empowering.
Yeah. And if you put all your eggs in that power basket, you are going to end up feeling bad when you get older. If you really do buy into that and you believe that that's your only source of power, then you're really going to feel bad once you're, in your 40s, 50s, 60s. So I would suggest you stop thinking that way and develop some other skills and qualities about yourself that you like and seek real power. But it's getting late. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I hope that we'll be back next week. I think we're trying to do this weekly, but subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the notification when we do confirm if we're streaming again next week. And don't drink the Kool-Aid. You can do this on Teespring. I've also linked to that below. Be sure not to drink the Kool-Aid. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mary Lou and Isabella.
Thank you.
Okay.